It's not the 12th century, but so-called Islamic State is doing its best to make us feel like it is. This morning, two men walked into a church in northern France, forced this priest to kneel and then cut his throat. One of them had actually tried to travel to Syria twice and was well known to the French authorities. Oh, and they filmed it all for good measure. France says it will use all means necessary to tackle terrorism now, but what does that mean exactly? Also on News at 10 tonight. In one of the crucibles of the threat, Syria, the situation in Aleppo grows increasingly desperate. Is some kind of endgame finally approaching? Dolly's healthier sister's new hope for a medical breakthrough from cloning. And the big guns turn out for Hillary.
My daughters and all our sons and daughters now take for granted that a woman can be president of the United States.
Tonight it's the turn of Hillary's husband Bill to try and woo America once more.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. If there was any doubt before today that 2016 is likely to be remembered for a summer of terrorism in Europe, it evaporated in a sunlit country church in northern France this morning. Two men with links to so-called Islamic State strolled into the church during morning mass, made the 86-year-old priest kneel in front of the altar and then cut his throat. It's an arguably irrelevant but somehow poignant detail that he was only taking the service because the parish priest was actually on holiday. The terrorists took 4 members of the congregation hostage. One, a nun, escaped. She alerted the police, who swiftly shot both men, one of whom, it turned out, had twice tried to travel to Syria to join Islamic State.
The terror that seems to be stalking France returned today, when men armed with knives attacked the most sacred and vulnerable of targets, a Catholic church in the middle of morning mass. Police and army flooded onto the streets of Saint-Étienne-de-Rouvray, a suburb of Rouen in Normandy. But they were unable to save Father Jacques Hamel, who was in his 80s. A witness said he was forced to kneel before having his throat cut. He'd been taken hostage with 2 nuns and 2 parishioners, while the men performed a sermon in Arabic and then filmed the priest being killed. One of the nuns was critically injured during the attack. Another managed to escape and raise the alarm. 19-year-old Adèle Camiche was tonight named as one of the men responsible for the bloodshed. The French president rushed from Paris. He seemed anxious to acknowledge the role played by security services, much criticised after recent attacks. There was a touching moment of solidarity with Mayor Hubert Wolfranc before he urged unity in the face of terrorism.
Nous sommes face à un groupe Daesh qui nous a déclaré la guerre.
We are faced with a group, Daesh, that has declared war on us, President Hollande said. We've got to fight this war in any way we can, while respecting the law. There appears to have been little or no negotiation with the men wielding the knives. The Interior Ministry said they'd been neutralised as they left the church.
It's understood that a police officer recognised one of the attackers. He identified him as a local man who tried to travel to Syria last year. He was arrested and jailed, but later allowed to return to live with his family, providing he wore an electronic tag.
Speaking in Paris tonight, the public prosecutor said the killers wanted to make it look like they had a bomb.
D'un faux engin explosif en papier aluminium.
One wore an explosive belt, the other had a kitchen timer wrapped in foil.
Un minuteur de cuisine.
Au commencement était le verbe.
A well-known figure, Father Hamel has served the community for more than 3 decades. Although retired, he was covering for a fellow priest away on holiday when the men burst into his church. Friends of the victim couldn't believe an elderly man of the church had been killed in this way.
It's very, very sad for the community, for the people here in Saint-Étienne-du-Rouvray. And also it's a strong symbol. The priest saying Mass, it's very, 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 very strong as a symbol.
According to the French media, this church was on a hit list of terrorist targets found on a suspect arrested in Paris last year. A man was arrested this afternoon, and the group calling itself Islamic State claimed that this attack had been carried out by 2 of its soldiers. Another example of the fear and carnage that can be caused by weapons like knives, so easily accessible in every home. Juliette Bremner, News at 10, Saint-Étienne-du-Rouvray.
Well, in a televised address this evening, President Hollande said the threat from Islamist terrorism in France and to Europe in general has never been greater. The war against it would be a long one, he said, but there does not appear to have been any obvious pattern to the attacks in France and Germany over the past fortnight. Some were inspired by Islamic State, others not. So how do the intelligence services deal with that?
13 deadly days across Europe. Bavaria's bloody summer is just part of it, because Germany's new normality is an old reality for France. It's 18 months since the Charlie Hebdo attacks, when leaders promised defiance and solutions to IS terrorism. Defiance was the easy part.
It's something to do with the fact of the noise around the brand and the sort of public attention it gets. It means that it's so easy to access and understand and connect with. And then the bar of entry is so low for the organization.
So was IS responsible for this summer of violence? Certainly not for the Munich shootings, which killed 9 people, but days earlier, an Afghan man who attacked train passengers with an axe had pledged allegiance to IS with a simple video selfie. Make no mistake, IS didn't commission these attacks, it encouraged them, then adopted them. Disturbed people looking for a meaning responded to its calls. Perhaps mental illness is the real common thread. It helps explain Mohamed Boulwel, who killed 84 people in Nice. He preferred the gym and the pub to the mosque, but pledged allegiance to IS before the attack.
IS looking for vulnerable people within those communities, to support them, to recruit them, to try to, if I may say, stuffing them with anger and rage until they are willing to commit such a horrific crime. So yes, mental illness is part of it, but not necessarily all of it.
And so what now? Should Europe escalate action in Syria to defeat IS? Coalition action is making a difference, shrinking the so-called caliphate, but not the ideology. And this isn't where European attacks are being planned from. So how can Europe respond? Today, Nicolas Sarkozy, the former French president, said, "We must be ruthless." That might mean even greater surveillance. But if France's response is perceived as targeting the Muslim community, it might risk further alienation. This is a complex social, mental, political issue. It's about more than just fighting bad guys. There might be a solution, but no one has found it yet. Rohit Katru, News at 10.
Well, Juliette, as you can see, is still at the scene in Saint-Étienne tonight. Juliette, President Hollande talks about all means necessary. What does that actually mean in practice, do you think?
I think it probably means being a lot more ruthless. He, along with former President Sarkozy, said they were going to leave no stone unturned. They were going to crack down. And perhaps we saw the first hint of that here today. As you know, until now, there's been a real determination that those founding or foundation stones of modern France, the liberty, equality and fraternity, should not be bulldozed away in this what seems like a wave of terrorism. But I think that today we saw that people are really at a loss as to know what the French police are doing wrong. This was a convicted terrorist. He was wearing a tag on his ankle, and yet still he got into this church and he slaughtered a priest. And they want to know why the police and the security services are not more able to protect them. And I think that these notions of brotherhood and equality may end up being sacrificed in a more zero tolerance, in a crackdown, because they will not accept that this can be allowed to happen again.
OK, Juliet, thank you very much indeed. Now, Islamic terrorism existed before the Syrian civil war and it'll probably exist after it. But the chaos there has, of course, allowed so-called Islamic State to dig in and build an infrastructure to export terror. That said, on the ground, they are clearly under pressure from all sides, and it feels as though the civil war might be approaching some kind of endgame, with President Assad's forces, backed by the Russians, advancing against their foes, Islamic State and other rebels alike. For example, the city of Aleppo has been under siege by government forces for a very long time. But the rebel-held areas in East Aleppo, still home to at least 300,000 people, are now almost completely surrounded by government troops. And in the last few days, they have blocked off the Castello Road, the last route in and out for food and fuel. Government airstrikes have been targeting hospitals and blood banks, severely depleting medical supplies and making an unbearable situation frankly unsurvivable.
It used to be Syria's most populous city, but today it is its most desperate. Aleppo is now a vast monument to the futility of Syria's civil war. This footage, released by the Syrian army, purports to show President Assad's soldiers continuing to advance through the city today. We don't know when this footage was shot, but residents inside Aleppo say the only road out is now cut off. Since the siege began, News at 10 has been receiving an insight into the deteriorating conditions from English teacher Abdul Kafi Alhamdo.
And all the world is silent toward these things, these crimes.
Day by day, his dispatches paint an ever bleaker picture.
More 10 people were killed and they are taken to hospital. Teens were injured. More than 5 families until now, they are under the rubble. So this is a genocide. We want to say to all the world, this is a kind of genocide.
And this is the result. Scenes like this repeated every day in Aleppo. This man has just lost his wife, who lies under the blanket before him, his arms outstretched for the body of his baby son, too mutilated to show. And the infants of Syria aren't even safe in hospital. This ward is full of newborns, lives started in the dust of a conflict that this weekend saw 6 of the remaining hospitals in Aleppo hit by airstrikes. There are now just 35 doctors in the rebel-held half of the city, and only 60 days of medical supplies left. The UN describes conditions as medieval. The French are likening it to the siege of Sarajevo. Aleppo is a city where not even the dead are left to rest in peace. Abdul Kafi visits one family stranded in this war zone. Their empty fridge tells the story of growing food shortages. Abdullah says yesterday we had nothing to eat. We only had stale bread. I swear to God, we have nothing. Her daughter, 11-year-old Rayham, says she's been too scared to play outside or to go to school since she was very young. But there are so many other children for whom this war has taken much, much more. Families plunged into grief every day amid the horror of the siege of Aleppo. Dan Rivers, News at 10.
Well, in a week where violence, often of course inspired by twisted interpretations of religion, has become distressingly common on the continent, the new Home Secretary Amber Rudd set out a plan on how hate crimes here could be dealt with more effectively today. Actually, it was prompted by the rise in attacks and abuse around the referendum vote. But whatever the reason, Miss Rudd said there was no place for hatred in 21st century Britain. Somewhat surprisingly, though, her new strategy does not include abuse on social media.
Signs left anonymously telling Poles to go home, racist graffiti, a verbal attack aboard a packed bus. As the UK works out its new international relationships, relations inside the country have been strained too.
I've been here longer than you have. What we clearly see is a manifestation of a lot of incidences impacting on communities, whether it's mosques, faith institutions, people at a street level, but also, and we need to stress this, the online world has been a significant area where there has been a high volume of this hate post-Brexit.
Since the middle of June, there's been a total of more than 6,000 reported hate crimes in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. That's up a significant 33% on the same period last year. But in the last 2 weeks, that rise, while still large, has begun to slow. Hate crimes over the last fortnight are now up 20% on last year. Today, the government moved to tackle it with £2.4 million for extra security at places of worship after religious leaders raised concerns. There will also be a push in schools after it was revealed 8% of the incidents involved young people.
Well, I think there are always going to be a small minority of people who will use some sort of event to vent the hate that they already feel. They will have their own reasons for doing so, but the good thing is the vast majority of people who voted in this EU referendum want nothing to do with that sort of hate. And part of my launch today is to draw attention to reinforce that point, that this is a country which won't tolerate any sort of hate crime.
I think the message of zero tolerance is very important. There's more work to be done to say we're now a society that takes hate crime more seriously. People should report it. 3/4 of victims don't report hate crimes at the moment. They need more confidence that it will be policed and stamped out.
No one is certain if there's been an increase in hate crime or an increase in the reporting of it. The effect of Brexit on the economy can be measured in stats. Measuring its effect on community relations is much harder. Allegra Stratton, News at 10.
Now, remember Dolly the sheep? She made history more than 20 years ago when she became the first cloned mammal. Groundbreaking as that was, she turned out to be a rather poor specimen, aging faster than normal, all of which cast a bit of a doubt over the cloning process and the medical advances pinned on it. But what no one, beyond a few scientists, knew was that there have, in fact, been 4 more Dollys created from the same cells as she was, and they haven't had the same arthritis problems, suggesting her premature aging wasn't, after all, caused by cloning.
Not one copy of Dolly the sheep, nor even 2 identical replicas of her genes. Not 3 reproductions of the same original, but 4. Debbie, Denise, Diana and Daisy, who think they're a flock, but are in fact 4 versions of the same animal. The triumph of this experiment, they've survived in perfect health to the age of 9, and you wouldn't know there was anything unusual about them.
No one who walked past a field in which these were in would ever think that they are a scientific curiosity, a scientific uniqueness. They're relatively almost normal sheep.
Can you tell the difference?
No, I'd be lying if I said I could tell the difference between those sheep.
Dolly the sheep made history as the first large mammal born from cloning, transplanting genetic material from one ewe into an egg cell from another. But at a young age, she developed osteoarthritis. That caused concern for stem cell researchers working on treatments for human diseases because of the possibility cloned cells could degenerate more quickly. The healthy progress of Dolly's genetic copies means that's not the case.
The study that we've done with these animals suggests that at least some of these cells are capable of developing normally and producing normal offspring. The challenge going forward now is to increase the proportion of such cells that we can use for treating human disease.
The people who carried out this research say that although these sheep are physically identical, after 9 years you get to notice they have slightly different personalities. Unless you have 9 years to replicate that research, you're just going to have to take their word for it.
In human terms, Debbie, Denise, Diana and Daisy are well into their 70s, and they're set to enjoy carrying on their old age in this field, unaware of just how important they are. Damon Green, News at 10, Nottinghamshire.
For anyone used to getting interest, however little, added to their bank account every month, the idea of having money actually taken away instead feels pretty odd, to put it mildly. But business customers of NatWest and the Royal Bank of Scotland have been warned negative interest rates, as they are called, could soon be applied to their accounts. Our economics editor, Narina Hertz, is here to explain this not always straightforward issue. We have, as far as I know, we haven't had Mark Carney saying we're going to get negative interest rates. So why have the banks done this?
Well, I think there are two potential reasons. The first is this could be them issuing a warning to the Bank of England saying, hey, if you cut interest rates to below zero, we are going to pass this on to our customers. Because we have to remember that banks, the UK's biggest banks, have seen their profits slashed since the financial crisis by 65%. So any further cut in interest rates is going to squeeze their margins even more. I think the second potential reason is, may just be that they want to prepare their customers for a possibility that this would happen. But my sources tell me that RBS has no plans in place for actually effecting a negative interest rate on their business customers, which makes me think that we're in the realm of the hypothetical here.
Okay. But we've never had negative interest rates. And when you talk about negative interest, you think Japan and countries with long-term stagnation problems. I mean, do you think it's a possibility? Do you think Mark Carney might do it? And if so, why might he?
Well, in countries which have tried this experiment, the theory behind it has been that by imposing negative interest rates, this forces commercial banks to lend more and therefore boost the economy. But in practice, we haven't actually seen this play out. Because in practice, what we've seen is that banks don't pass the cuts on, one. Two, customers in times of uncertainty don't want to borrow more. And three, there's a negative psychological effect that comes with negative interest rates that itself serves to depress the economy. And Mark Carney's aware of all this, which is why he's come out really strongly against negative interest rates. So, businesses have quite a lot to be concerned about right now. I don't think they need to add this to their list of worries.
Okay. That's very clear. Thank you very much indeed, Narina. Now, we've long talked about it and reported on it, but tonight it is actually happening as we speak. For the first time, a woman is about to become the official nominee for president of a main political party in the United States. It's hard to believe it has taken until 2016, but there you are.
Many people have tried to take down Donald Trump and failed. Last night it was a turn of the immensely popular First Lady. Without once mentioning his name, Michelle implored Americans to rise above the insults.
When someone is cruel or acts like a bully, you don't stoop to their level. No, our motto is, when they go low, we go high.
She said her own experience is daily testimony to the fact that America is not failing.
Today, I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves.
And then she gave her wholehearted support to the woman who her husband had once fought and defeated.
And because of Hillary Clinton, my daughters and all our sons and daughters now take for granted that a woman can be president of the United States.
The reality, though, is that like Republicans, Democrats are divided.
Thank you.
But Bernie Sanders pleaded with his openly weeping activists to back Hillary, even as they pursue a more radical agenda.
Together, my friends, we have begun a political revolution to transform America, and that revolution, our revolution, continues.
Where Sanders has been astonishingly strong, where Hillary has been weakest, is with millennial voters and on college campuses. So the question today is whether Sanders has lost control of the progressive movement he ignited. Can he persuade his supporters to move into Hillary's column? John and Nino listened carefully to Sanders last night, but they plan to ignore him, saying Hillary's appeal to their generation is simply not authentic.
She's just pandering to us. She's pretending she plays Pokemon Go, for God's sakes. Like, come on. We know you don't, and stop it. Like, just be honest with us.
But could his wife be persuaded to vote for Hillary?
No. It's just black and white. There's no way.
But back in the convention arena, many insist there is the starkest choice imaginable.
We're either going to elect the first woman president, or we're going to elect the first American dictator. It's that simple.
Democrats are promising unity by the end of this convention. but their message is still struggling to reach core voter groups who will be crucial in November.
Robert, Bill Clinton, as you say, about to step up. He certainly knows how to work a crowd. Is he, do you think, essentially a plus or a minus for Hillary these days?
Oh, look, there's no question at all, Tom, that Bill Clinton is still a very powerful advocate for his wife and extremely popular. He will be in this arena tonight, but it's also, I think, fair to say he is a much more subdued and faded political figure than he was a decade or so ago, and he does come with political baggage. He reminds voters in the heartland of America of the sex scandals of his time in the White House. He reminds voters also of just how long Hillary Clinton has been in the public eye. Much more powerful than Bill Clinton. The real kind of heavy hitters, the rock stars of the Democratic movement are going to be Bernie Sanders and, of course, President Obama himself. Those are the two who can be deployed as Hillary's most powerful activists. They can go to the college towns to bring out student voters. They can go to Midwestern industrial cities. They can target African Americans and millennials and union workers. So look, Bill Clinton is a somewhat nostalgic figure, but the really important political surrogates for Hillary are going to be Obama and Sanders. That said, put the three together and you do have a formidable get out the vote team in your corner.
Robert, we've seen in recent polls that Donald Trump is ahead. Do you read much into that at this stage?
You're right. I mean, today, just in the last few minutes, we've had a poll that puts Donald Trump 2% ahead. Tom, to be frank, I don't give that much credence. We've still got key events to happen. We've got on Thursday night Hillary Clinton's acceptance speech. We've got, of course, further down the track, 3 presidential debates. And we've also got external events that could play into this, such as a potential kind of national security or foreign policy crisis. So I think it's safe to put those sort of polls we're seeing now to one side and not think they are going to dictate what happens in early November.
Robert, thank you very much indeed. Finally, she is only 4'6", but British gymnast Claudia Fragapane is a seriously big hope for a medal at the Olympics, now just 10 days away. She won 4 golds at the Commonwealth Games 2 years ago. Now she's heading to Rio on a spring and a prayer.
They start them young in gymnastics. Here's Claudia Fragapane, aged 6, in a Christmas concert. Her talent and charm was already obvious back then. She's 18 now, and her routines have become a lot more strenuous.
When I was about 5.5, 6, I went to a Kingswood local gym club, and then they thought I had potential, so they sent me to Bristol Hawks. And straight away, my coach, Helen Potter, took me in, and I was doing my tumbling and all my flips and stuff.
She was recommended by one of our satellite clubs to come to us, and we knew she was special straight away because she's always had that bubbly personality that you see when she does her floor routines and everything now. So that was there right then.
Fragapane came to national attention at the 2014 Commonwealth Games in Glasgow when she became the first woman to win 4 gold medals. Her father came here from Italy when he was just 4. Her family are very much part of the Bristol community. They're regular churchgoers, and she admits she has a little prayer before competition. And after all her success, she's quite a local celebrity.
Do you get recognised around here in Bristol now?
A little bit.
What's that like?
Yeah, it's nice, but you know, if you look a little bit like a scruff, it's not so nice.
British gymnastics has never had it so good. At the London Games, the team won 4 medals, including Louis Smith's silver and a bronze for Fragapane's idol, Beth Tweddle. So how does she think the team will fare in Rio?
I think we have potential to get a team medal. I feel like British gymnastics is getting stronger and stronger, and if we do all our work right, what we do in training, we all work so hard and we go out there and compete, fingers crossed we could get a medal out of that. And then individually I would love to go all around and just get the best score that I can.
Fragapane has an infectious charm essential to winning over the judges, and even though she's just over 4.5 feet tall, she packs quite a punch. Ian Payne, News at 10, Bristol.
Certainly be nice to have some good news, wouldn't it? The economy, when the April to June growth figures are published. The new Chancellor, Philip Hammond, will be talking about those, but they don't include what has been going on since the referendum result, so arguably pointless. But there you are. The Labour MP, Owen Smith, who wants to replace Jeremy Corbyn as leader, of course, will set out in a speech his ideas for the party and why he thinks would be good at the job. That's all tomorrow. Raggy will be here. I'll be back on Thursday But for now, from me, good night, and thanks very much for watching.